Welcome everyone, and I've got you all on mute now, so we'll open that up towards the end of the video for a question and answer session. So we'll start out now by getting into our body. So before we learn a bunch of information, we're just gonna get still and get within our body. So a lot of times people become disassociated from their body, and what one really great thing about the bowspring is it brings us back into our body so we can pay attention to feel what's really going on here. So if you're not already, find a position where you are seated on your legs. Instead of sitting on your bum, sit on your legs. So you can even reach up underneath your bum and pull your sit bones back and out and wide. And we're seated on our leg bones. From there, make sure your feet are planted on the floor. Hopefully you can be in a seat where your hips are a little bit higher than your knees. Toes are down and the spine is floaty and fluid. Close your eyes for a moment and we'll consider our rib cage. And imagine your rib cage expands in all directions, circumferentially. Take a big breath slowly through your nose. And as you exhale, maintain the fullness of your rib cage. Walk your hands to your knees and experience your arms in a straight but not locked position. Take another breath in through the nose, expanding the rib cage. And as you exhale, keep that expansiveness in the rib cage. And now imagine your head space light and lifted. Inhale in, imagine this space lifted up, floating high, separating. Imagine a quality of the palate, the roof of the mouth lifts even. Now open your eyes, eyes on the horizon. Welcome. Hopefully you're nice and checked in with your body right now. So we're going to do some things today. We'll start out by talking about the history of the bowspring. We'll talk about how it started. I'll share with you my personal story, and then we're going to go through what the bowspring is exactly. We'll talk about the benefits of it. We'll get into our bodies a little bit more, not much more this session, and we'll talk about some expectations and challenges you might find after starting the bowspring. And then we'll do a question and answer session, and I hope you join me for that. And let's take one more breath together. Inhale and exhale. So when we do these grounding exercises, we find ourselves ready to learn, ready to take in and soak up as much information as possible. We'll start at the beginning, the history of the bowspring. So the bowspring is relatively new. And in this picture you see, I'm in the middle and I'm standing with Desi Springer and John Friend. The story of the bowspring starts with Desi Springer, and it makes me proud and joyous that this was started by a woman. Desi Springer is from Denver, Colorado, and she was a yoga practitioner and teacher and has owned a studio in Denver since 1999. The studio started as a Bikram studio. If you know anything about yoga, Bikram is basically the antithesis of bowspring. So bowspring is curvy and bouncy. Bikram is straight lines and very, very straight up and down posture and a very locked posture. So it's interesting to me that this this child of hers started from completely opposite beginnings. So she started a Bikram studio, and eventually the Bikram studio evolved to Anusara, which is what John Friend taught and practiced. Anusara was more based on Vinyasa yoga. So she had this studio for 20 years, and around the early 2010s, she was dating a basketball player, as the story goes, and she asked him, would you ever consider tucking your tailbone as you played basketball? Because tucking your tailbone is a common cue in modern postural yoga and other exercises. And he said, oh, no way would I ever do that. That's where my power is. And so she said at that moment, she decided she was never going to tuck her tailbone again or teach other people how to do it. So she adapted her style of yoga to what she learned from this. And that's the origins of the Bowspring. That was around 2010. And she started developing it and experimenting with it on her own to find movement with power. John Friend, the man on the right, he has helped systematize the Bowspring. So he joined a couple years later. He has been studying yoga for 46 years. He's been teaching yoga for 40 years. So he's quite an authority in the United States on yoga. He has studied with Pahat Joyce, the originator of Ashtanga yoga, which is the origins of Vinyasa yoga, if you've heard of that before. He then studied exclusively with Iyengar, the founder of the Iyengar method, which is alignment based. So this is an alignment guy. He's scientific. He's a scientist. He's a brilliant mind. He's really into anatomy, physiology, and alignment. He developed something called Anusara yoga, which is a teaching style of yoga in the United States. And he influenced Desi Springer with that. But it was around the early 2010s when she influenced him. So he was having a lot of hip pain. He was thinking about getting a double hip replacement, and he was having some other struggles in his life at the time when they started having discussions about that. And she started asking him new questions. What if you did it this way instead? And after some debate, he finally realized her way was correct. Since 2013, they've been cultivating this Bowspring practice and touring the world, bringing it to Germany, Australia, Austria, Scandinavian countries, Japan, and China. It is quite popular. It's growing in the United States, but not as much. People in the United States are more attached to the Vinyasa style, which is a multi-million-dollar industry, and it's not going anywhere. With me, I will share a little bit of my story. I've been practicing yoga for over 20 years, the modern postural style, and I've had a lot of stress in my life. I hated my job. I had a really hard time finding a job that I wanted to stay in. I would just move around from career to career. My relationships were fleeting and not very strong. I was a Debbie Downer for a bunch of down and outs for most of my life. I had no confidence to start anything on my own. And I started to have health problems in my early 30s, specifically gastrointestinal disorders and problems like that. It came to me as quite a surprise when somebody who was from Denver suggested that I tilt my pelvis forward. It was a girl that I met who came to stay with me for a little while, and I said, "You're totally absurd. Why would I ever do that? Doctors actually have told me to keep my pelvis straight, and I've been taught in yoga to tuck my tailbone." And I thought I should know. I'm a yoga teacher. I taught people every day of the week to tuck their tailbone. So I was quite intrigued with this woman's suggestion, and she mentioned the word Bowspring, and I thought that's That's ridiculous. I've never heard of something so ridiculous, and what's up with that weird name too. And so the first thing I did when I got done talking to her was look it up on the internet, and I thought, oh, this looks intriguing. And so the next day I decided to attempt the posture at work. So I had a regular 9-to-5 job. I attempted the posture throughout my workday, and when I got home, and usually I had to lean on the counter while I'm making my dinner because I had such gut pain and low back pain that I was just so exhausted and in pain at the end of the day. But I noticed after this first day of trying the Bowspring that that pain was totally gone, and I felt a lightness inside of me. It was at that moment when I realized that this was true and there was something to this. So I started studying it devoutly, and I ended up having to quit teaching all of my yoga classes except for one because I no longer felt in integrity teaching the old style anymore. And I spent all of my time devoted to studying the Bowspring and learning it so I can teach it better to other people. And that's what is my joy, to share it with as many people as possible. I share it with everybody I know, everybody I meet. It has changed my life in so many ways. I now have the confidence to start something like this, to teach people about it, to start my own business. My relationships are blooming and blossoming, and it has affected my life in every single aspect. I've got off of pharmaceuticals that I've been on for 25 years, and I owe it to the Bowspring. I owe a lot to the Bowspring and these wonderful people that are my teachers. And I'm so passionate to share it with all of you today. So what is the Bowspring? The Bowspring, I love this slide. The Bowspring is a position of readiness. It's more animal, less mechanical. Think of it like you've got a spring in your step. It's bouncy, it's glidey. It's the way a cat moves. It is ready to act and ready to react. So we're aware of the situation. We can see everything as it comes our way, and we're ready to react to it. I've heard story after story of people practicing the Bowspring, who are practitioners of the Bowspring, and they have accidentally tripped. Maybe they're walking their dog or something, and they were astounded at the reaction time was so fast that maybe they fell, but they bounced off the ground and landed on their feet. I've heard so many stories of that, and it's happened to me as well. So it's a posture of readiness. We're ready to take life, whatever comes at us, without fear. It is a postural template. So Bowspring is a template that can be applied to every movement that you have in your day, whether you're sitting at your computer, you're walking the dog, you're playing hockey, you're mountain climbing, surfing, anything that you can think of, you can do it with the Bowspring with more efficiency and effectiveness. That's one of my favorite parts of it, and that's what I think, that's one of the things that makes me so passionate about the Bowspring. A little aside here, so some people ask me, do I still practice modern postural yoga anymore? And the answer is yes, I do occasionally. I'll go to a regular alignment yoga class. And I actually did this recently, and not only could I do it after not having practicing it for about a year, but I was better than I was before because of the Bowspring alignment has taught my body uniform tone. The Bowspring is a system and a practice. So like I said, it's a postural template so you can apply to your everyday life, but it's also its own practice. It's got its own set of moves, just like modern postural yoga, just like Pilates and ballet has its own moves, just like martial arts will have its own moves. So Desi and John have developed a beautiful system, and they've named their poses so you can do a Bowspring practice in itself. Bowspring is radical and revolutionary. So it's radically goes against our modern teaching of what good posture is. So I'm not going to tell you to pull your shoulders back, to push your shoulders down and stand up straight, because that's not what Bowspring is. I will teach you a functional posture that will add life to your years and make you feel really, really good. But it's not going to go along with what your doctor's telling you, what your what most physical therapists are teaching you. In fact, one of the reasons why I held my pelvis in such a straight up and down way before is because I had a physical therapist tell me to do that and tell me it was wrong to hold it any other way. So it's going against what they're telling us and what they have been telling us. It goes against modern thought on the structure of the body, that the body is built up of bones resting on top of each other. And we'll talk about new science on fascia later. Bowspring is accessible. Anyone can practice this at any time. So I have actually worked with my grandfather, who is in a nursing home, and propped him up in the Bowspring, and he felt a lot of relief when I did that. So you can use this if you are an athlete. I work with athletes as well to sharpen your skill, to get stronger and faster, or you can use it if you're in the hospital bed and you're healing from that. So here's a slide about the standard model of what good posture is. You'll see the image on the left shows the body straight up and down, and there's a plumb line, and that's the gravity line. So if you think about it that way, you'll think the bones are sitting on top of each other, and especially look at this. I want to draw your attention to this joint right here. So the knee joint, if we are aligned up like that, how do you think that's going to wear over time? So it's just, if this is good posture, just from a physics point of view, how is that going to wear and tear on the joints if we are letting gravity push compression all the way to the heel? It just doesn't make sense that way. The standard model of posture is relatable to this Lincoln log structure. So can you imagine what would happen if you touch the Lincoln log structure? It would easily fall over, and the same with this body right here. The standard model also tells us that we should have our shoulders back, the bones stacked in a straight line, the head over the ribs, over the hips, over the knees, over the heels. It's straight up and down. The standard model of posture tells us that we are static. We are not moving. We are sitting straight or standing straight without motion. In the standard model, the connective tissue, the fascia, is passively resting. So this straight up and down model, you don't have to have much engagement at all to stand straight up and down. And in fact, that's why a lot of people do it. It doesn't take a lot of energy to do that. And just a show of hands here, raise your hand, go like this if you can see any disadvantage in that standard model. Anybody? Mm-hmm. If you get knocked over, you're going to fall over flat. So the next model, this is the Bowspring model, is based off of a tensegrity model, which is based off of new science on fascia. A tensegrity model has struts that are held together by elastic. And the elastic is analogous with the fascia in our body. And you can see what happens when you press down on a tensegrity model. It expands in all directions, which is quite different from the standard model. If you press down on that Lincoln log tower, it's not going to go anywhere. It will just compress. Or if it's your joints, it'll compress the joints. If you press down on one corner of the Lincoln log tower, the whole structure will shatter. However, if you press down on one corner of the tensegrity structure, it will affect somewhere around the line. So that's why this model makes a lot of sense. If you are having shoulder pain, maybe it's not the shoulder that's hurting you. Maybe it's somewhere further along the line, maybe your hip, maybe your arm, your hand, that needs to be adjusted. And it's affecting your shoulder. That's where you're getting the information from. So the tensegrity model is a curvy, springy model. It's fluid movement with minimal force. The connective tissue engages evenly and it shows the body is more liquid than solid. Imagine your bones are floating struts in a network of elastic connective tissue. It's really quite beautiful. Fascia is a hot word these days. What is fascia? I think a really good explanation for fascia is for you to really think about it and feel it, is that feeling in the morning when you first get out of bed and you want to give a big stretch. What you're feeling there is the opening of your fascial networks. So when we're immobile, when we don't move for a really long time, the fascial networks, which is the webbing of our body, the sinew, it forms webs, and those webs link together. And when we start moving, for example, waking up in the morning, we can break open those webs that have formed. Now, the more webs that are formed, the harder it is to break it open. And more webs form, the less you move. So if you are in the same position for a long time, say a hunched over position, more fascial networks form, more webs are formed. If you're not coming out of that position, you will get stuck there. So what is fascia? Fascia is the largest system in the human body. It wraps around blood vessels. It wraps around muscles. It wraps around ligaments. It is ligaments. It wraps around your bones, and it encapsulates your organs. And all of it is connected. It's not separate. It is composed mainly of collagen, so it is elastic. So like that tensegrity model that we saw here, the fascia is what makes it bouncy. So the Bowspring incorporates new science on fascia. And new science shows that this fascial matrix, this whole body encapsulation, has 10 times more sensory receptors than muscles. That is huge. So what we're feeling is coming from the fascia. And if our fascia is bound, and we can become numb to it and lose connection with our body. So this new science that Bowspring has looked at is the importance of healthy connective tissue. And they do so with an even tone of the connective tissue to create a balanced, healthy, and springy bodies. So this slide is great. So in the bow, why do we call it the Bowspring? So I've got a little illustration here, and this is a bow and a spring. And when we add the bow plus the spring, we get something called a double S curve. And we talk about this a lot in the Bowspring. So we'll have, I'll do a little drawing here. So the double S curve is an outward curve of the head, an inward curve of the cervical spine or the neck, an outward curve of the thoracic spine, and we acknowledge this to be our primary curve, which is one of the hardest curves for people to establish when first learning the Bowspring. Primary curve. It's caved in on a lot of people. We've got another inward curve here at the lumbar spine. And this one, this curve here is flat in a lot of people. And a lot of people, it is curved inward, but there's problem elsewhere. And then there's another curve here. So what we have is a double S curve. It is the posture of health. Also, we think of these as moving upward. So the glutes are mounding upward in this double S curve. And we can see it here with this, my friend here, an Austrian Bowspringer. He's got that same double S curve while he's sitting. And we repeat this throughout every Bowspring pose and when we're just living our lives. So the belly is bowed and the body is spring. So we get the spring from the S curve. So if we don't have the S curve, we're not going to be springy or bouncy. We also get the spring from something that we call the hollows. I wonder if I can do this in a different color. So the hollows, I'll just point to them here. Think about hollows as a caving in area. So every joint in our body is a hollow. So we don't lock out any joints in the bowspring. We create a hollow from which to make a spring. So it's a spring-loaded position throughout the whole body, not just the spine. And I am always excited to see bowspring spottings in real life. So this is this always gets me going here. The gentleman on the left, he is at a weaving loom, and he is sitting in a beautiful, healthy position. You can tell at the end of the day, he is going to be vibrant and have a lot of energy because he's not sloped over. He's maintained that double S curve of the spine, that healthy curve. The woman in the middle is a competitive climber, and I see this when I look at pictures and watch TV of any competitive athlete. A lot of times they are unconsciously holding this position naturally because it is a position of power, and the best of the best who are athletics, their body knows it already. And then the picture on the right is of a boy from an indigenous culture, and you can see his glutes are strong and mounded and lifted up. And we know this and we see this about indigenous cultures. And a lot of times we tell ourselves they're different because of genetics, but that's not the case. The difference in his body is not due to genetics. We can learn this. That's due to behavior. His behavior is different. The way he moves his body is different because of his culture. He hasn't learned how to slump, how to sit all day from watching other people. His body shows a complete difference. And it's not genetics. We know this because we can train ourselves to have that bounciness of structure. Mm-hmm. And the opposite of that is the C curve. The C curve has a shortened belly, and you can see it is the shape of a C. It is the posture of technology. It is the posture of driving. We sit in this position when we are in the dentist chair, when we are in an airplane. The front of the body shortens, the back of the body gets long and lax. We slump the head forward, the tailbone tucks to a posterior tuck. It is the posture of sitting at desks. It is the posture that we're told to do in some exercises classes, even when they tell us to tuck our tailbone and do crunches. It is a posture that we sit in all day when we're at work. We drive around in this posture. We come home and we sit in a recliner or sit in front of the TV in this posture. And then we might even get into bed in this posture, holding the C shape the whole time. And that's why after a long time, we end up like this gentleman on the right, hunched over and stuck in that position. And although I believe that there's hope for anybody, it's going to take you a lot more time to undo those fascial binds. If you stay in the C curve for a long time, for years, it'll take a lot more time to get out of it. So the best time to start is now. And it's not going to change if you don't do anything. It's not going to get better. There's not necessarily anything wrong with the C curve, and I want to say that right out front. The C curve is really great for comforting yourself. If you are feeling vulnerable and you need to go into that, it calms your nervous system. But part of what I teach is that we have a choice. We have a choice to be in the C curve all day, or we have the choice to be vibrant and be aware and be open to life in the double S curve. And one thing that I want to address is the one of the criticism over the bowspring is the confusion between lordosis or sway back and the bowspring posture. And there's quite a difference. In the sway back, she's got her rib cage over the hips. There's no connective tissue tone, and usually there's a hypermobility in the joints that goes along with this. This is achy and ouchy at the end of the day, and it's not a healthy posture. In the bowspring posture, she's got the hips behind the rib cage, and there's a springiness in the joints. There's a uniform tone and an expansion of the rib cage. She is, in fact, in a spring-loaded position. The next slide here illustrates the main postures next to each other. So we have the closed position, which is the C curve, and you can see the neck and the waist, which includes the low back, take the brunt of the pressure in this position. That's why so many people have neck and low back pain. That's where people get hurt. They've got hernias and they get fusions, spinal fusions in those two areas, the cervical spine and the lumbar spine. The upright model, you can see here how it just puts, it's a compression model. In fact, when we look at it from a physics standpoint, it looks nice and pretty there, but imagine the effect of gravity over time. It's not going to benefit you. And then there's the sway back, which we just looked at, which is that low tone. It's going to be ouchy for the low back. And then you see the bowspring posture with the double S curve, which is spring loaded and bouncy. Bowspring is uniform tone. So one of my favorite things about the bowspring is the uniform tone. So I'll work with my students, and I will, and when I'm working with myself, I'll do a little test to see if you're holding uniform tone. So I'll push their hand out and they'll have to resist it. I'll say resist and go all ways. So it's uniform tone, tone of the muscle to the bone. It's all the way around. So when you're lifting weights and you're doing a bicep curl, you're working your bicep. When we're doing the bowspring, we work the bicep and the tricep at the same time because we're seeking uniform tone. For example, even in a handstand, we want to be working our legs just as much as we're working our arms, which leads to a floatiness, a lightness, which any bowspringer will tell you is one of the things that they love about it, is a lightness, a floatiness to the posture. So you can see this woman right here. She's from Germany. She actually had this picture in German Vogue. Let me see, where's my spotlight? Okay, see, she's got the back of her leg here is turned on so this leg that's lifted is turned on just as much as the standing leg. And if it's not, then she's lost the uniform tone. Her arms are engaged. She's got the bicep firing and the tricep firing. And we'll talk about that later. How do you turn on your tricep when it's, because it's hard to do? The answer is she's using her hand to do it. That's why we make the weird hand movements in the bowspring, and you see how her foot's in a weird shape right here. She's doing that to find the uniform tone in the back of the leg, which is hard to access. The reason why our bodies, people who live in the United States, don't look like that boy from the indigenous culture is because we've forgotten how to use this whole posterior chain of our body. It's our culture. And in this next slide, I've got it compared to pose in modern postural yoga, which I'm not saying anything bad about. I'm just showing you the differences between the two. So this pose in modern postural yoga is called Warrior 3. And notice how it's straight lines. She's locked out. And then the pose on the right is from the Bowspring posture. And in the pose on the right, she's engaged. If you can just look at the two pictures here, which one seems like it's more steady and stable? Which one looks ready? Which one can you move in? The answer to that question is the one on the right. It's the Bowspring posture. It's steady, it's ready, it's able to move, it's able to bounce, and it's uniform tone. So that's why I entitled this class, Move Smarter, Not Harder. I could do a beautiful Warrior 3, and I know a lot of people who can, and it's not an easy pose to do. But the benefits of this pose on the right, propeller pose, is going to get you there where you're going faster because you're uniform toning the body. It's going to change your body a lot more with less time, and it's not going to have the wear and tear in the joints that the one on the left will have. Bowspring is dynamic. So in Bowspring, we don't have that straight up and down like that Warrior 3 posture. I'll go back to this. Okay. The Warrior 3 is static. It's not moving, it's straight. She's gonna stay like that until she moves into her next pose. On the right is Bowspring propeller pose. Now that's gonna have some movement in it. It's gonna have a pulse in it, is what we call it. So why do we do that dynamic movement? Because it increases efficiency. It tests the springiness. It tells us that we're using uniform tone. And because our daily lives are not static, even if we're sitting at our desk, we can stay up, we can move around. When we're living our lives, we're bending down, we're reaching, we're picking up even a stone. Fine motor movement. Okay, and I wanted to share with you guys this video of Desi Springer. It's a beautiful promotional video, and if you haven't seen Bowspring in action, this is really beautifully illustrates the uniform tone and the dynamism that's involved. And I'm gonna play it for you and talk while it's moving. Just keep in mind, she is a professional. She's the one who developed this, so don't feel bad if you can't do this right away. Okay, so we move slowly and pulsy. She's got her head back, her rib cage full, and her hips back. Notice how she touches her fingertips. Every movement is with extreme intention, touching the floor, swiveling with the feet. She's maintaining uniform tone throughout. Such consciousness of movement. And the reason why is to find that uniform tone. We get aware of our fingertips, of our fingerprints. It's changed my relationship with my fine motor movement. You see the lightness of that handstand? It's from the engagement of the backs of the legs. Really cool stuff. Bowspring is openness. So it's a positive mindset. We welcome in new truths. It's a posture of positivity. We open up the sensitive area of our body. So that area of the body that an animal wants to hide and close off, we open that up to other people. We stand in this position and we become more sensitive to who we are. We welcome new truths in our lives. And that is a contrast the C shape, which is a posture of fear and depression. That's where we go when we need comforting. It's where we go when we need to quiet emotional distress. And old energies and old memories are held in the tissue. So when you stay in that C curve so long, your trauma resides there. When we start to open it up, we break open that trauma and it starts to come out. We start to look at it, and it can be painful to do. So Bowspring's not just about the body. It is not at all. This is total emotional awakening that's going to happen in your body when you start doing this. Bowspring is mindfulness. So that's a buzzword these days as well. Through constant analysis and repositioning of your body in space, you are changing neural pathways of your body. It is self-awareness 100%. We become aware of our default patterns. So we become aware of the way that we take a step that we've done our whole life. And because we'll change it and to do it in a more functional way. When we become more aware of this, we're able to honestly see ourselves in a different way. The mindfulness aspect has been what enabled me to get off of ADHD medication I had been on for 24 years. Because I am constantly reposturing myself through the day, I keep bringing myself back to focus, and it's changed the way that my brain works. It's enabled me to start this business, to teach this to other people, to learn technology that I had no need or use for before. It is openness and feedback to our bodies and environment and our relationships. We become more aware of our patterns that are keeping us in pain. So we break into our bodies and we see, oh, that's not serving me anymore. So I have a choice now. And it empowers us with a helpful choice. We can stay stuck or we can choose something new. And sometimes the newness has some pain involved, but it's a choice for our evolution. The benefits of the Bowspring. There's so many benefits of the Bowspring, and I've just got a list here. Some of the things that really have interested a lot of people are this one right here. Curvy figure with lifted glutes and a long belly. So people who practice the Bowspring generally start to get a similar body with the really strong posterior chain of muscles. Your hamstrings, your glutes, your calves they learn how to refire. They learn how to work. They've been on vacation for a long time. So your body will change. I know that my upper back is a different back. I have a different back than I did 3 years ago. It was collapsed and the shoulder girdle was caved in. Your joints will be balanced. So that's another thing that is really big here. That's the reason John Friend, he was scheduled to get 2 hip replacements, and now he's got no hip pain at all. And that's big. You can actually see the changes that your joints are making in your body. My big toe, both of them used to angle outward, and they're moving inward. They look different. And I felt myself about 1.5 years ago reposition my hip. So the joints, instead of knocking on each other and rubbing, they spread out when you find that uniform tone of the fascia, and then they start to reset to their new normal, which is free and functional movement, liquid movement within the fascial network. Pain relief, eventual loss of pain, lightness, strength, nimbleness, agility, balance is something so big that I help my clients with all the time, and it's changed for me as well. When I practiced modern postural yoga, I had good balance, but it was tight and gripping, and it was basically all out of the foot. This new kind of balance I have now is like a balance from my back, and I can move with it and sway with it. And it's a dynamic balance that is translatable to everything I do all day long. So I feel safer everywhere I go. The mind benefits, I talked a little bit about this before, are ability to focus, power of rational thinking, discernment. And then the heart benefits. One of the most interesting things that John and Desi shared when I first learned about the Bowspring was that they said that people were coming to them saying that they had courage now that they never had before. And I felt this on my own, and that's one of the things that is intrinsic to this practice and lifestyle, is that you start having strength and courage of your own, strength of will, positive mindset. That I didn't have those things before. And I did yoga, I practiced yoga, I was a devout student. This is a big change. Okay. Expectations. So within the first month of practicing Bowspring, you'll notice some things start to change, and I've written them down here. Increased mental focus, self-awareness, increased compassion, self-acceptance. There's an orientation period that is recommended, that you get at least 10 hours within the first month. So with this month here, you can make an intention, set that for yourself to get 10 hours in this first month. I have videos on YouTube. I make a free class online on Thursdays, and I teach at a rock climbing gym. If you want more options for getting more Bowspring practice into your life this month, let me know, and I'll share with you other options. But it's really important if you want to see the shift fast, and we're all in this together. We can make a game out of it. We'll try to get those 10 hours in within 30 days. You'll be able to feel this shift immediately. Not to say if you spread it out, you won't, because I've worked with clients who only do the posture when we have our sessions, or they're not actually practicing the practice. They're just holding the posture in their daily life, and they still get the benefits and the changes. They don't come as fast, but they still happen. So during this first month, or this month of December, start to pay attention to your postural patterns throughout your day. Start to notice maybe your right foot turns in, or you walk with both feet and knees pigeon-toed. Why do you do that? It's your pattern. Start to experiment with repatterning that. The basic information of the Bowspring, I tell people it's memorizable. You can memorize this template, but it takes time for you to neurologically process it. It takes time for your brain to pick it up, but eventually the Bowspring will become your pattern. And I've seen that within myself and with other people as well. There's still certain patterns that I default to. My old ways come back, and I notice and I check, I'm like, oh, that's my old pattern. But there's certainly, absolutely 100% areas of my body that I don't have to remind myself to reposture anymore, because it just goes into it already. It's the new normal, is this comfortable double S curve. Some challenges in the Bowspring, and there are challenges. There's always challenges with growth. There is an emotional opening that will happen, especially if you devote 10 hours within the first month. You're going to feel the emotional opening. You will, because we're targeting sensitive areas. We open our belly up. We soften our belly. Your whole life, they've been telling us to suck our belly in and to tighten that area, to do crunches. And with the Bowspring, we're going to do the opposite. It's like opposite day all the time. We're opening up those sensitive areas, and we're being vulnerable. And that takes some courage, and you're gonna feel it. It could be uncomfortable. It's also uncomfortable realizing our weaknesses and seeing the truth. Yeah, the truth is hard. There's also feelings of beginner inadequacy. So a lot of times when people start the Bowspring, they've got complete what we call gluteal atrophy. So their glutes don't even know how to fire. You've got like a really shriveled up muscle in your butt, and it's hard to do these poses for some people because they just don't have the strength there. So that takes some time. This is going to require you to access and tone weak areas. So I might ask you to feel your toe pads touching the earth, and you might not have any sensation there. There's areas of your body you're going to realize you were totally disconnected from, and you're going to feel inadequate because you're not going to know how to do that. That's okay. Everybody goes through it. I went through it. And you're going to feel it too. But just know that this is just part of the process, and that's normal. Another challenge for a lot of people is, since they don't have the gluteal strength, they'll try to make the double S curve by putting using the muscles that they do use, which is the low back muscles. So the low back muscles will get tight in the beginning because their brain doesn't know how to use the glutes, and it uses the low back muscles instead. And that's normal for a lot of beginners. You just got to keep reminding yourself to soften the low back and to turn on the glutes. The third challenge is it's an alignment paradigm shift. We're going against what everybody else thinks and says is normal. We're going against what everybody says is the right way. So this was huge for me. I had to disconnect with what I studied and what I taught to people. I had to realize that I was teaching people something different now, and it was like a life-changing thing for me. There's an intellectual neurological calibration that's necessary. We all go through this together, and that's one good thing about us doing this in a group. So we've gone through a lot right now. Let's get back in our bodies here. So wherever you're sitting, let's repattern ourselves here. We might have come out of it for a second. Establish connection to your femur bones and the chair. You can close your eyes here, and then feeling a lightness of the rib cage. Imagine your rib cage is like a Goodyear blimp, and it just expands with each breath. It gets lifted. It lifts you away from the waist. There's more room between the rib cage and the hips as your rib cage lifts up towards the heavens, and the head does the same thing. The head lifts and glides and floats, and both the rib cage and the head, they can sway side to side. Reach your hand palms to the knees, arms go straighter but not locked, and lean back into your heart, your fullness, your wholeness. Take a big breath in and exhale. One more breath in. Keep the bigness of the rib cage as you exhale, and open your eyes to the horizon.